First, thanks for waking up with us. We start with President Trump warning lots of bombs will fly if there's no deal on the table when the ceasefire with Iran expires tomorrow night. Now, at this hour, Iran is casting doubt that it'll even return to the negotiating table, still threatening to retaliate after the U.S. boarded an Iranian cargo ship. And while the president signals he wants a deal, he says he is in no rush to get one done. Washington correspondent Trevor Shirley has more on the White House messaging shortly. But let's go first to international correspondent Robert Sherman, who's in Tel Aviv. Robert, the president's also warning the blockade of Iran's ports is going to stay in place until they get a deal signed.
Yeah, that's the United States' biggest point of pressure right now amid all of these ceasefire talks and these scheduled negotiations to try and keep Iran at bay here. It's not going anywhere. It's already turned around 27 ships, according to Central Command. But Iran digging its own heels in, saying that the Strait of Hormuz is not going to be reopened as long as that blockade is in effect. And when you look at the live look at the Strait of Hormuz, big congregation of ships to the west, big congregation of ships to the east, not many that are making that crossing right now. Nevertheless, as we quickly march towards the ceasefire deadline of Wednesday, the president believes he's in a position of strength.
We now are controlling the strait. We're not letting them get any. You know, they're losing $500 million a day by us blocking the blockade, blocking the strait, the Hormuz Strait.
New images released from Central Command showing U.S. naval forces operating around the Tosca, the Iranian flagship, which was fired upon, boarded, and seized by U.S. forces, making good on their promise to take aggressive action against any ships that try and run the U.S. naval blockade. Iran hitting back at all of this, calling it an incident of maritime piracy and a terrorist act that is not only against the fundamental principles and rules of the United Nations Charter and international law, but is also another example of a clear violation of the ceasefire agreement. And while there is still hopes that this diplomacy takes place face-to-face between Iran and the U.S., there is other diplomacy that's expected to take place this week that heavily involves the region. Thursday, News Nation has learned from sources familiar that representatives of the Israeli and Lebanese government are expected to meet in Washington, D.C., talk about the future of their ceasefire and also the prospects of peace between two nations that do not recognize one another. Marky?
Yeah, we'll see where and how those talks pick back up. Robert, thank you. Let me now bring in Trevor Shirley live at the White House. Trevor, Vice President Vance expected to leave for Pakistan today, but we're getting mixed messages from the president on a potential deal here.
Marky, good morning. You're right. President Trump is projecting optimism just over a day until that ceasefire is set to expire. Now, he admits time is not on his side, but what's important, he says, is getting a good deal for the United States. Now, the president says a new deal would be better than the one President Obama struck with Iran, but the president signals he's not under any pressure to get one done right now. On Truth Social, the president said the next round of negotiations would come together, quote, relatively quickly. Now, we know Pakistan is making preparations for an American and Iranian delegation to sit down today. Vice President J.D. Vance is expected to head to Islamabad as early as today. That is, if Iran agrees to a new round of talks. At this point, the U.S. is still waiting for a signal from Tehran that it's ready to talk. But right now, Iranian officials say the U.S. is just trying to force them to surrender. Iran's parliament speaker warns that the country is preparing to reveal new cards on the battlefield if the ceasefire expires. Now, the president says if a deal happens, it will guarantee peace, security, and safety for the world. But as we know, time is ticking and the war could still expand if both sides don't come to some kind of agreement to get this extension done. Now, the president told Bloomberg News Monday that it was, quote, highly unlikely the ceasefire would be extended here at the 11th hour. Marky?
Trevor Shirley, live at 1600. Thank you so much for that latest. Joining me now to discuss the path forward on Iran is Republican Congressman Randy Fine of Florida, also a member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Congressman, welcome back. Always good to see you.
Thanks for having me, Marky.
So Iran Parliament has been very clear publicly that Iran is not going to participate in talks under threat. Do you think these talks are even going to happen?
Well, look, the challenge for the president, who's doing a great job, is that he's dealing with terrorists, Muslim terrorists who believe in this crazy view of the world. And so it's always hard to know what they're going to do. But here's the simple fact. President Trump is not going to allow them to have a nuclear weapon, and he's not going to allow them to have a missile that could deliver a nuclear weapon to the United States. And whether that's disarmed by force or through peace talks is up to Iran. But we hold the cards here, not them, and they'll either show up or they'll have to face the consequences of not doing that.
Do you think he'll allow for a ceasefire extension?
I don't know. I mean, I know that what he wants is them to be disarmed with the minimum violence possible. But that's up to them. If he doesn't feel like they're negotiating in good faith, then he will proceed, because there are lots of targets that he can go after in Iran. What people need to understand is anything that the military in Iran uses for their own benefit is a legitimate target for the United States. We've shown a lot of restraint in going after military targets. That's something the president can stop at any time.
And would you support that? You know, come Thursday morning, say there's not a long-term peace deal in place, the ceasefire has expired. You know, he has threatened to go after power plants and bridges. Do you support that kind of military action the very next day, sir?
Absolutely. And people need to understand that a bridge that is used by the military is a legitimate military target. A power plant that powers their military is a legitimate military target. We cannot afford Iran to get a nuclear weapon. This is a country that for 47 years has screamed death to America. We should believe them. And a nuclear weapon could kill millions of Americans on the East Coast. It's simply a threat that the president cannot allow to take place.
Speaking of what we can afford, Congressman, let's talk energy prices right now. As you know, those have skyrocketed here at home. I want to get your reaction to these comments from the president. Take a listen.
They wanted to close up the strait again, you know, as they've been doing for years, and they can't blackmail us.
Is the president right to hold this line, even if it means $6, $7 a gallon at the pump here at home?
Well, on average, gas prices are about $1 higher than they were before this began. I think they'll go back down when it's over. But what I would tell people is think about the cost of a nuclear weapon going off in Chicago or Washington, D.C. or New York. That is a real threat. We've already seen that Iran can fire missiles much further than we thought, and we can't afford to learn that they can hit the United States when a missile lands here.
Yeah, and that's also the latest update from Iran, is that they have new cards to play on the battlefield. You know, and a new defense report says that they're still in, you know, they have thousands more missiles left, one-way attack drones. Are you surprised by that, just considering that the Pentagon has repeatedly said they have decimated all their military capabilities?
Well, I wouldn't believe them in terms of what they say they have. They are known to lie. But what I would say is this: as the fighting took place before, we saw the rate of missile firing, the rate of drone launching decrease every single day. Do I think they still have some missiles and some drones? Sure. Do I think they have a Navy or an Air Force or the kinds of things they would need to beat us in a fight? Absolutely not. And so, look, war is not a good thing. I don't want it to happen, but we cannot allow this genocidal regime to have a nuclear weapon. That's what this is all about. And President Trump has been very clear. If they give that up, if they give up the desire to have a nuclear weapon, we will be able to bring peace to the region. That is a very reasonable position.
Between this war, the high prices, and this partial government shutdown being the longest that we've seen in history, are you worried yet for your party come November midterms?
No, I think things are going to go fine. I don't think the conflict in Iran will continue for all that much longer. It's been about 6 weeks. I always said we'd be able to measure this in days, weeks, or months, not years. I think we're seeing that. And I think the voters are going to reward us in November for the great work we've done. People's tax refunds have gone up. Employment has gone up. Fundamental economics, other than gas prices, are really good, though I would note they're still much lower than they were under Joe Biden. And so I think things are good. I think we'll be fine in the election. But the important thing is to do the right thing, not to worry about politics.
And lastly, what is your message to voters and your constituents back at home who do worry that we're drifting into a war with no clear exit strategy? How can you allay those fears this morning?
Well, I think there is a clear exit strategy. Iran needs to give up a nuclear weapon, and they need to give up the missile to deliver that nuclear weapon. We have reached many of our goals already. We've destroyed their Navy. We've destroyed their Air Force. We've hugely degraded their missile shield. So most of the objectives that we had in this conflict have already been reached. Just the last one needs to be reached, which is the nuclear missile. And I'm hopeful that we'll get that done, and I do think it will be done soon.
And that's easier said than done, I imagine. We'll see how the American delegation works in the next 24 hours. Congressman Randy Fine, thank you so much for being here, as always, sir. Have a wonderful
Thanks,
Tuesday. Well, the push to clean house on Capitol Hill not letting up.